Emily Green. I am a financial advisor at a company called Ellevest. We are a mission-driven investment firm, which I know is not something usually goes together, that's on a mission to close the gender investment gap. So whether a woman has $1 or $100 million, our mission is to empower her financially. You know, that's just a little about me. I thought it'd be great if we could just introduce ourselves before we go into the conversation.
My name is Nadia Sutton. I'm an interventional cardiologist at the University of Michigan, and I'm also a physician scientist, and I do basic science research in vascular biology.
I am Nasrien Ibrahim. I'm a heart failure and transplant cardiologist at Mass General, and I'm also a clinical researcher.
I'm Fatima Rodriguez. I'm a general and preventive cardiologist at Stanford University, and I also do research a large portion of my time.
I'm Key Park. I'm an interventional cardiologist at the University of Florida. I also do women's cardiovascular research.
I'm Lakshmi Tummala. I'm a general cardiologist at Washington, D.C., affiliated with Georgetown, and I have an interest in medical education.
Just to kick off the conversation, you know, we're here to talk about financial empowerment, especially for women. I was amazed to hear what the wage gap is in cardiology, that I was shared that it was 2.5 million over a career, which is 2.5 million. That's a lot of money. So shocking to think about that. From your perspectives, what do you think it is in cardiology? Do you think it's the lack of transparency? Do you think it's just full on the bias that exists? I mean, it's probably a lot of these things. Sexism. Like, what do you guys see?
I definitely think that lack of transparency is a challenge. It's hard to know sometimes what you're even being compared to. So, you know, without actually asking, you know, somebody else, perhaps, you know, what is your salary or what does that encompass? What is your bonus? You know, so without actual, you know, published, you know, log of what others are earning in your same field, in your same institution, it's really hard to make that comparison without feeling like you're prying.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something that we talk about a lot, is that women are taught that talking about money is a bad thing. And so men can go and talk about money all day, and you're like, hey, bro, I just made $100,000 on this deal, like, let's go to dinner. But women talking about it is like looked as, and society in general is kind of like gross.
Yeah, or that we're being difficult when we're asking for a raise, or when we're asking for what we know we're worth. We, you know, we're looked at that we're being difficult, or difficult to work with. But I think, for me, I think it's important to have mentors and sponsors that are men, and maybe one day you won't need a male sponsor or a mentor to guide you through that process, especially with your first job. I think that was the toughest, because you're leaving fellowship and you're like, finally, I'm gonna get a salary, I'm gonna be able to live with a real job. So sometimes you just take whatever they give you without negotiating. But I think for me, the most beneficial thing was having male sponsors throughout that process, helping me understand what was enough and what wasn't. And I just emailed my male colleagues that were close to my year of training and asked them how much they were making. And I think people were frank with what they were offered.
And I think to Nadia's point, it was that there's the salary makeup is a little bit complex, especially in academic institutions. So I remember meeting with my division manager, and he's like, X plus Z and bonus and blah, and then technically, and I'm like, whoa. So and I'm like, oh, you know, I'm sharp, but he was like, don't worry about it, you know, you know, you're not going to make a bonus. But why? You know, especially if you're in the research world, you have to make your salary with grants and things. So I think that adds a degree of complexity. But I actually sat with our finance manager at our department and said, can you just walk me through every line in our P&L? And then I knew what to ask. But I agree with you that right after fellowship, I was just like, thank you, I got a job.
And I think that was one of the most helpful things that I did, is sit with a financial manager and tell me exactly what every percentage was, what it meant, just the basics. And I just wrote it all down, and I put it in my office so that when I know the next paycheck comes, what I'm supposed to expect. It's part of financial education and empowering yourself to know exactly what portions of your salary, where they're coming from.
I think also going back to why it happens, there's this question of like knowing your worth, right? Like everyone cites that famous HP study where women won't apply for a job until they have all the characteristics and men. And so you know, I was at this Women in Cardiology seminar, and this woman was talking to us about negotiations, and she was like, of course you should over ask for what you think you're worth. And everyone in the audience was like, oh yeah, like 10% more, 20% more. And she really pushed back, and she was like, why not 50% or 80%? And it was like complete silence in the room, and everyone was like, no way could I ask for like 180% of what I think a fair salary is, you know? But maybe that's part of what we need to do, is to like feel more confident in, I am worth this is what I bring to the
I think part of
institution.
it is actually related to, there's been a lot more discussion in our field about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think that also relates to feeling like you're not worthy enough or that you didn't do as much as your male colleague to go out there and ask for that. I find in my experience, you know, I'm 6 years into being a faculty member, and I've only started to think about that within the last maybe 2 years. Once I sort of felt like I had sort of caught up to my peers and now I'm more experienced, and then it kind of opened your eyes to, oh, this is not really as fair as it should be. When you're first coming out of fellowship, I think that you're not even to that point yet, but you, like you said, I mean, you need somebody who is advocating for you and making you aware. When I graduated, I had one of my, now my colleague who was my attending at the time say, you know, Key, this is your only opportunity to negotiate, like at least in the immediate future. So even, you know, one of the good tips he told me was when you negotiate, you know, you may not be able to negotiate for an increase in your salary, but you can negotiate for other you know, salary-based things, like more, you know, dedicated research time or something that's a little bit, you know, softer, but that is still valuable to you.
Right, or like CME money, anything.
Exactly, right, something. But if you're not told that, I think, like you said, you're just so glad you're done with fellowship and you have a job. But it's challenging if you don't have somebody, you know, guiding you.
And that starting salary like dictates the arc. You know,
Exactly.
career, so it
Yeah,
matters.
I mean, that's what actually a woman's, on average, a woman's salary peaks in her 40s and a man's peaks in his 50s. And it's all also, you can, if you look at the trajectory of it, it's actually incredible. So not only does it matter because you're making less, women tend to live longer. We've made less money, so we actually retire on average with 2/3 less money than men. That's a lot of money, and then on average you live 6 to 8 years longer. So when we looked at it as actually the retirement crisis in our country, we actually looked at it as that it's actually a women's crisis.
My husband's a physician. He's a pediatric anesthesiologist, and somebody's like, "Oh, he makes good money," you know. So
I've heard that
like,
several
oh, so
times.
why do you need? Yeah, why do you need it? You know, you don't. And I'm,
Or if you're single without kids,
You don't need that.
I don't need
you don't
money
need it.
because I don't need to go on vacations or buy purses.
Either way, you don't have money, right?
I mean, your salary should not be based on need. It's based on what you
Yes,
deserve
what you
for the
bring
work
to
that
the
you're
table.
doing,
Yeah.
regardless of, you know, your gender.
Yeah.
Some of this I find also, you know, I don't think exclusively happens to women. Like I've seen cases of younger male faculty who are also struggling, I think, to get, you know, sort of fair compensation. You know, sort of struggling with other more senior faculty about work distribution and that kind of thing. So I've seen shades of it. It's a different tone, but I think it is similar.
And I would
issues,
say
too.
male faculty of color too.
Right.
Junior male faculty of color have just as tough a job, I think, as we do.
Right.
With that first contract.
Yeah.
Well, and then the problem, to your point, that occurs is that if you keep getting underpaid and someone's telling you that your husband makes enough money, you get so frustrated that you're like, all right, screw it. I'm just going to go stay at home.
Yeah.
And all right, I don't need to deal with these people anymore. And that happens a lot because you're like, I can't deal with this bias anymore. I'm just done. Fine.
It's a disincentive to
Yeah.
work harder.
Just give up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if you feel underappreciated, that's a contributor to burnout,
Right.
and then you're not going to be productive. You're not going to do good research or clinical care.
Yeah.
So it's just this cycle that
Right.
starts with feeling underappreciated.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the reality of it.
And there's this RVU-based system that even in academics is actually pretty prominent. So what happens is that even though people maybe are paid the same base salary, they may give certain people more high RVU earning opportunities, such as
Right.
CCU for cardiology
Yeah.
or echo reading. So that's kind of another way that you get into this trap of getting underpaid.
And you don't learn those things until you're
Right.
here. Like
Right.
when I was a
It's too
surgeon
late,
fellow,
yeah.
I interviewed at a job, and these two women ran this practice, and they were like, yeah, we average 10,000 RVUs a year. And then I came back to the echo lab, and I said this number, and everyone was like, no, that's too much. Like, you know, you'll never be able to sustain that. And I had no standard or like number in my head for what's right. And I think in general, you know, a lot of trainees, like medicine is a long time, and the match is standardized, and everyone gets the same salary. And so I was, 32, I think, when I was negotiating for the first time. And like, I had no practice, and I felt like it was the skill set that all my non-medicine friends had learned in their 20s.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I was late to
absolutely.
the game.
And some of it does go back to how your salary or your contract is set up, Fatima, like you were saying, like you were told that you would not receive a bonus based on how the structure, or maybe that's, I hope I am interpreting correctly what you said, but somebody else is. So that person has an incentive to do more work, whereas you're sort of capped with no matter how much you would work that you would potentially
There's a
not.
diminishing returns.
There's
And I
diminishing
think-
returns,
But
right.
on a positive flip side, so my institution across the department has implemented full transparency just based on you're an assistant professor, year one, this is your set base salary. Of course, there's a lot of variation with these XYZ bonuses and things like that, but at least we're a level playing field for the base salary.
Is it for all of medicine or just cardiology?
For all of medicine. So they're like, this is what, and of course, cardiologists earn more than some other specialty, but it's very fair.
Do you
and transparent.
think, and tell me, like in cardiology, is that a lot of men kind of at the top? And do you think that
It makes
goes
a
to it as
huge
well?
difference. We need women that are chairs and
And
chiefs
leadership.
and
Yeah.
leaders, because I can't imagine putting a woman as a chair of cardiology and not trying to fix those
Right.
inequities. I have a friend actually who just became a chief of OBGYN, and one of her first tasks was to look at all the salaries, and she was shocked that even in a field like OBGYN, that's majority women,
It's
the
still-
men were still making more money
Wow.
than the women. Like, crazy.
And like you said, like most of the sponsors that have been leading this in my institution are men, like Bob Harrington, Paul Heidenreich, so they're senior male cardiology leaders, but they've really looked at this gender gap issue.
So speaking of leadership positions, I think that's also tied into this, is that I think women tend to get fewer opportunities for advancement, and then that advancement is recognized through increase in pay.
Right.
So I don't think that completely accounts for all of it, but I think it's an interrelated issue, which I've experienced. I won't go into the details, but a little bit of that, and it is very disheartening when you get to the point where you feel like you've done the work and you've put in for that title, and for various other factors, that doesn't get recognized. And kind of like you said, you get disincentivized. Like, I'm doing all this work and it's not really, it's really leading to anything. And then in a discussion we had earlier, someone also mentioned, even the actual gap aside, women tend to do more non-compensated activities. Like, I'm always asked to be the party social player.
Right.
And I'm like,
I refuse to. Me too. Because I just feel like it's a stereotypical
Right.
woman's job.
Yeah.
So I do not plan parties.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
not
Good for
take
you.
notes. I
Right.
refuse. I'm not like set up a happy hour. Nope.
Yeah.
You can do it yourself. Because I'm not going to take a stereotypical unpaid woman's job.
Interview all the fellows.
Yes.
All these-
Right.
There's a lot of things that, and I think it was Bob Harrington who said, everything that people ask you to do, ask for FTE. And, sometimes they say no, but I always ask, and sometimes people are taken aback. They're like, whoa, citizenship, citizenship is so important. I'm like, my citizenship is like 300%. Like, I got to tone it scale back. That's not paying the bills.
Agree. I think boundaries are
Yes.
important.
And I
Yeah.
think being systematic about it like that is really smart, because then it doesn't feel confrontational. You're just like,
Right.
this is what I do every time. This is reasonable.
Well, and I've realized that, we're talking about how, things that come out of a man in terms of asking for things is perceived as being assertive and strong. When it comes out of woman, there's other terms that are used.
Yeah.
In a negative fashion. And I used to be very leery of that, and I've become more firm about it because, talking about pay, I don't necessarily need the pay, but the pay is a form of appreciation
Yes.
and support and getting recognized for the work that I do. So when I put it into that perspective, I think it helps me sort of advocate for myself, because it's not the money.
Yeah.
It's the intent
Yeah.
behind the pay.
You deserve it.
Exactly.
Don't say you don't need it. It's yours. You worked
Right.
for it. We went to school for a million years, and we deserve to be paid
Exactly.
the same.
And men just, they just lay it out.
Yeah.
They don't care what the number of 50%, like they'll ask for double. They will do that. So.
They'll apply to a job where they have 1 of 10 qualifications.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the
Right.
relative value that gets to me too. Like if
Yeah.
two people are doing the same thing, there's no reason I can justify why one person is getting paid more than the other. So when I negotiate, and I think when we all negotiate, that's also something to talk about. It's like, I'm not just doing this for me, I'm doing this because women in general shouldn't be underpaid. And this is like a step towards shifting that needle.
Yeah.
So let's talk about more money issues, specifically the gender investment gap. And let me define, we look at this a lot. This is the focus of Elevest, and so the fact that women keep 71 cents of every dollar in cash. That means for the average woman, it costs her hundreds of thousands of dollars over her lifetime. For you guys, it probably costs you millions of dollars over your lifetime. And I know some of you live in very expensive places, so investing may not be like top of mind, but it's a very important thing to think about. Do any of you invest now? Are there things that you think are hindering you from doing so? Like, what do you think about when you think about like this industry in general?
So when I first became an attending and got a real job and a real salary, I knew for the first year I was not going to save any money.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's my first year out. I'm going to blow a lot of money. But then by my second year, I know you were making fun of the books, but I did read a few books
good for you.
that I loved.
But you guys are
actually.
research people. You like read things
Yeah.
and do that.
So The Automatic Millionaire and Smart Women Finished Rich, because they're, again, he explains everything in very basic terms. I could relate to it. And then it was in probably the end of my second year as an attending, that's when I started thinking about, okay, I'm going to have a rainy day fund that I don't touch. And then I'm going to start putting more money towards my 403B. And then I have a separate investment account with, I guess I don't want to say the name of the company, with
financial institution.
another financial institution. And then I actually have a fourth kind of savings towards, again, because I'm 37, and I want to get pregnant one day, I probably will need IVF. I literally have an account because I know people go broke, not able to afford that. And so I started thinking about those things, but then I still live my life. I mean, I have a budget, but I still go out, I travel, I do all the things I want to do, but I just feel more comfortable that I know in the future, or if something happens to me, or if I need to quit my job, that I have that safety net, and that, in 30 years, hopefully, I'll have enough of a retirement that I can still live comfortably.
Yeah, oh, that's great.
So first I'll say you could also freeze your eggs or think about doing that.
Also expensive.
I think the thing that tipped me over was maybe like 6 months into attending, I did one of those retirement calculators that you can find online that are free. And it was like, here's how much you're on target to save, and here's how much you need to save. And like I was like red, flaring lights. And so I was like, okay, I need to do better about saving and investing this money. And I also had seen a headline that was like, women make anywhere from $50,000 to $2 million less because they don't invest properly. But I didn't know how to do it. And I'm going to share this very embarrassing story, so like I'm an attending, I have some disposable income. I was like, great, Vanguard is a very reputable company. I will invest some money with them. So I transferred some money from my bank account to a Vanguard account, not realizing that I just put it in a money market savings account in Vanguard. So then it just sat there. And then I was like, this is like, investing is supposed to make your money grow. Nothing is happening. And then finally, in a conversation with a friend, I was like, oh, in fact, I have to buy shares of a mutual fund. I may want to edit this out later. I have to buy shares of a mutual fund. And so then I transferred it over, and then it's like very satisfying to see it grow, But even those basic things. So I think the two questions that I have are, well, one's a question, one's a comment. One, I wish people talked about it more. I feel like money is this very black box. No one talks about it, and so it's hard. And I think, honestly, because I'm single, I feel like I've probably become more financially literate than I might have if I was making decisions with someone else. My question is, how do you know what quote-unquote good investments are? Like, I was like, okay, you're supposed to invest broadly. Let me try the stock market. I downloaded the Robinhood app. I gave it a try, and then it was really stressful. The numbers kept changing. I was checking it every day, even though you're not supposed to do it. I know. So I was like, okay, this isn't for me. Let me try something else. And I was at a conference, and there was a woman who was speaking about financial literacy, and she talked about how your origin story impacts the way you think about money and how you invest. And I thought that was like so insightful, and no one else had ever said that, like
That's how your parents dealt with money. It really affects it.
They invested in real estate. Some of it didn't work out. I'm so gun shy about that now. So I don't know how to direct this money that I've saved that I know should be doing something besides sitting in my bank account.
People in Miami tend to be really bad with money. I went to like a public high school, very low income. People had like nice cars, right? Because you could finance everything. And this like culture, like, don't worry about it. Take out a credit card, go bankrupt. Just go bankrupt, no big deal. So my husband's like, you're a financial planner's nightmare. And then finally, you start, okay, I actually have some money in my bank account. And my husband's like, do you want to put it like in a pillowcase? Because that's how you think. You don't trust anybody. But I'll say that, to your point about buying your house, like I live in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
I'm never going to buy my house, right?
Yep.
So Stanford's helping you.
I know it. I live in New York.
I will never buy it. But it's just like, what do you do with that money? And like many things in my life, I like to outsource, right?
Yeah.
So we actually met with a financial planner, and I was like, I am never going to understand all the stocks and bonds and which is a better account. But I met with somebody that I liked, and I said, please help us invest this much money that we have as a couple. And that's been, I don't know, I think we're not making that much money, but at least it's not sitting in our bank account.
I think that's the really important part, and actually, is that you don't have to manage your money yourself. And there's actually, and it doesn't have to cost you a lot. But what I would say to thinking about like financial advisors, financial planners, is there are some things you really need to think about. And I find that even people who are like really financially savvy never know this stuff. And it's the one key question I think you always ask someone is if you're a fiduciary, because this always like blows my mind. But legally, some financial institutions have to do what's best for you, but the majority of financial institutions, like almost every single big bank, does not have to do what's best for you. They legally are not held to that standard. They have to do what's suitable for you, which means they can take their product that costs 1% more than the Vanguard product and put it in your account because it's beneficial to them, but it's okay because it's suitable to you. So thinking about like that simple question, are you fiduciary, yes or no, is actually means a lot.
But even that, if 1% is the standard fee, and I'm willing to pay that, but then there are like these online options that are less than that, and there's flat fee options, and then like I looked one of them up, and it was like flat fee is $5,000 a year, which I haven't saved enough, so right now the 1% is less than, So how do you navigate that?
I've kind of taken the easy way out, I feel like, because our institution does a very generous matching program, and then you have the option to essentially add funds to that on top of it. And so I've essentially, it's like something I don't have to think about. And I assume that because, and maybe I shouldn't assume, but I assume that because I work for a very large institution, which is very fiscally responsible, that they've sort of already identified some safe options for savings. And then also, I've got my kids and I've got to pay for college. And so, we've decided that we're going to set aside a certain amount, which is challenging because we're still paying back our student loans.
Yeah.
So paying back our student loans, saving for kids'
saving.
college, but essentially we were fortunate that we did not have to move after fellowship. So we stayed in the same place. We didn't have an increase in our mortgage payment. So we were able to then direct whatever overhead from, excess beyond the fellowship sort of salary towards some savings. But I think it's even a little bit more challenging if you're living in a much more expensive area. And we live in Ann Arbor, which is actually, for Michigan, a pricey area, but not as bad as some other parts of the country. So,
I will totally admit I'm like a financial idiot. Like I just have never been inclined, even though my father was a business professor, ironically. But a part of the thing with me too is that, so my husband is very, very financially savvy. His entire family are literally all accountants. So he's just always taken on that role.
Yeah.
And I've let him.
Yeah.
But recently it's been interesting. So we have a 5-year-old and we also started considering building a home. I live in Gainesville, Florida, so it's a fairly rural area. So for an academic salary, you can do a fair amount with an academic income in our area. And it wasn't until I started thinking about, like, the thing that appealed to me about thinking about finances more in detail was, what kind of money do I want to have saved away for our son's education? And what is, a reasonable amount to put towards this house right now? Because it's an investment. And so, my husband, as good as he is with finances, had involved a financial consultant, at least periodically, to sort of go through everything. But I think it also kind of helps you, kind of relating to our earlier point about the gender wage gap, sort of puts things into light about, what you're going to use your money towards and how important it is to advocate for, because you've got to save a lot more than you think you do. And when you go from a fellow to an attending, it seems like this, absurd amount of money, but it's not, because someone mentioned, you have your loans depending on what, type of payback scale you're doing. My husband's the type that he just literally wants to pay everything off right away. So we didn't even start thinking about a house until we'd gotten a good chunk of things paid off. So I've only recently been in that position of reframing things in a way that matter, are relevant to the way I think, I guess.
I mean, I think the biggest thing about money actually is that it gives you choices. And it's not necessarily, like, we always say money is power in the sense that, I mean, we live in a capitalistic society, so yes, and literally it is. But it's also, it gives you the choices of what you want to do in life. So do I have the ability to buy this house? And looking at your money and having the power over understanding it is what gives you that exact ability to say, what house can I build? What kind of money can I put away for my son's college? Like, those are the exact choices that, like, having this understanding of your money really gives you. So this all kind of goes into financial empowerment, financial confidence. As I mentioned before, we found that actually investing and saving is actually a huge component to feeling confident, not only financially, but just like in general in your life. People who invest, people who save just feel better on a day-to-day basis. They feel less stress. Like, do you guys think you're financially confident? I feel like from this conversation, the answer is no.
No.
I'd say no.
The time I've taken to study and learn about things has made me much more comfortable and confident. Even when I do talk to my financial advisor, I don't want to go in blindly. So I have some background so we can have those conversations, and I don't want to feel like I'm being taken advantage of because there's bad people, of course, in every industry. But it does make me feel more confident and secure in my future if anything were to happen, or if I be ready for retirement when that time does come. So I think taking the time, the classes, reading the books, and the blogs, I think, and there's lots of podcasts too. I don't spend my entire time learning about this, but I've spent enough time that I feel comfortable and confident.
Maybe you should work in finance.
No way.
This is so interesting because I also feel like I understand the basics and I feel good about where I am now, but I don't know what to do for this next step. Like, I feel like I'm on my way to saving enough for retirement. I, have.
Right.
But like, what's
you
the
open
next
this
step?
account, but then it's then what?
Or like, my sister and I were talking about this the other day, and she was like, "What stocks do I buy?" And I'm like, "I don't know where I go to."
You shouldn't buy individual stocks.
Question.
But I think this even goes back to our first conversation about like the gender pay gap, right? Because I feel like when I'm talking to my division manager, it's the same thing. Like, I think he's, I wouldn't say tricky me, but I think because he's like, don't worry about the details, like adds up to like 100%. So I feel the same way about financial plan, that if you don't know kind of the minutia, it could actually hurt you. So it is important to have a basic understanding, and I think once I have time between my two kids and my job, I'll learn the basics, not as advanced as you, but I think just having a good financial planner for me seems like the most obvious solution.
I agree. I feel like a lot of you are kind of in this, what we call like the sandwich of like, you're trying to save money, you have kids, you're also at the prime years of working. So you're like, okay, how do I balance all of this?
And you have to live your life outside of all this too, and have fun.
And you can't just read the financial books all day.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that, I've spoken to some other colleagues who actually had some formal exposure to some element of financial planning when they were medical students.
Oh, interesting.
And the reason, and you may relate to this, but is that the VA actually has certain reimbursements. I'm primary VA also, and they have certain loan forgiveness programs that the VA will compensate for, but only if you start to pay back your loans under a certain structure. And so my colleague knew that coming out of medical school, so he signed up for a particular type of repayment plan. And then he ended up with, he didn't know he was gonna get a VA job, but he had been at least aware of that. And I had no idea. So I think that if you could start it, because I think everybody would benefit, not just women, but
I agree.
In medical school, and kind of understanding, because we have specific types of financial needs. Like you said, we have all these loans to pay for.
all those years.
It's like 10 years later than everyone else.
Right.
And even in cardiology, fellowship's kind of specific to our situation, that we're so kind of far advanced in our training.
Yeah. I mean, I never had anything like that in training. I mean, at all.
did I.
I mean, we're so busy trying to just learn.
Just to survive, right.
The field, but
And it's, I think to some degree, it's embarrassing to admit the things that you don't know, right? Because you're going to feel like judged, or like everyone else around me seems to know that, and why haven't I learned that yet? And it's I think that, and then it's so individual based on the way your family handled money when you were raised. And those two things are so individual, and so then I think it's hard to talk about it, but if we don't talk about it, we're not going to learn.
yeah.
I mean, I would say that like everyone should talk